Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple Human. Today, you're going to be hearing this live on LinkedIn as well as on the podcast. So I'm very excited to be sitting down with my dear friend Philippa. Today, we're going to be talking about all things creative. But before we jump in, can I please remind you that there is a newsletter available for every episode. So if you haven't already subscribed through the LinkedIn newsletter or through the newsletter on my website, lindseyfrances.co.uk, please do. And now, Philippa, are you ready to talk all things creative?
Yes, I'm ready, Lindsey.
I'm very excited about this. Philippa, we've been talking about this for a while, and I've spent quite a long time in the years that I've been doing this creative sophrology work, wondering why creativity is so important. And as I always say to you, Philippa, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. Well, that's absolute nonsense because I'm a human being, and therefore I am creative, created by the creator to be creative in this world. I've got 2 hands, 2 feet, a mouth, eyes, and all sorts of other senses that I can use to be creative. And indeed, I just got a loaf of sourdough bread out of the oven, my first attempt, and there I was creating something. Thank you, it was delicious. Philippa, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because many of my clients, primarily chief executives and founders, don't have what I would suggest enough of a creative outlet. And you are not only an artist, but the artistic programmer of the 2026 season at Espace Enchanté on the shores of Lake Geneva. And you're very, very passionate about the work that you do. You've worked across many, many countries in your time and across multiple languages. And we're going to talk a little bit about the exhibition. I was about to say expedition, the expedition you've done to get this exhibition going and why creativity is so important. So, Philippa, is there anything you'd like to add about that intro in case I've missed anything or there's anything you would like to say?
Yeah, I think that's a great intro. Thanks so much. And you're right about every human being is creative. And lots of people will say that, oh, I'm not creative or I can't do this. But really, I think that's just a little confidence issue rather than a suggestion of somebody's lack of creativity.
And I think also for founders that are listening and entrepreneurs, if they've created a business, they're creative in the first place. They're using their creative abilities every single day. But what I also see in my clients who do then engage in more creative activity is it actually up levels everything else in their lives. They begin to start thinking far more interestingly and creatively. They start using their intuition, they're in their bodies. It's really a superpower that I think we're perhaps losing, and AI is certainly eroding. So, Philippa, without further ado, and I will come back to AI, by the way, if any of you are listening, I've just been on an AI and creativity conference. It was wild. All young people, blew my mind. Philippa, I'm going to start by asking you some questions. And the first question I've got for you is, why do you think creativity is such an essential part of being human?
Well, actually, I want to link it back at the beginning to what you were saying and you engaging with your audience who own their own companies. And, creativity is the founder of innovation, really. And in order to innovate something new, you have to be creative and you have to fail because, those kind of failure attempts are on the way to creating something that nobody's ever thought of before. So it's in one part innovative. And in another part, it's just part of being human. Humans have been scribbling on caves for centuries and we haven't stopped. So why do we do that? Well, I guess it's to tell our stories, to talk about how we feel, and to leave a bit of a legacy, I suppose, of who we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that explanation. And you're so right. In order to innovate, we need to be creative. So there are lots of people out there that I think are probably more comfortable saying I'm an innovator. And then if you said you were creative, they've perhaps not seen the way that the two are part of the same package, really. They're two sides of a whole. I certainly have got more into creativity the older I've got. And I don't know what happened in my childhood, but it sort of maybe got beaten out of us as we become, very academic, or we're into just information processing. But I would like to ask you, Philippa, how does art in itself, the art form, the observation of other people's art forms and the creation of our own, help us understand, express and transform our emotions?
Well, it's difficult because, like I said, you might create something and it might not be what you intended. But I think at its raw level, it's taking an emotion or a fleeting moment, or something that you feel in that moment, and trying to solidify it, trying to make it into something concrete that you can watch or see, pass on and share to other people. So it's kind of like preserving those moments in time so that we don't forget them and we don't forget how we feel.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I see people spend a lot of money on sort of photography and the preservation of memories, if you like. I do a lot of work around legacy. What is it we're trying to leave behind? What does it look like when we're sort of doing wealth transition? And I wonder if people think, well, I've taken a photograph of it and that's enough. You know, you see people at concerts, don't you, who are looking through the lens of their phone rather than experiencing what's going on around them. And I wonder if we've shifted really to the end of the capacity of the camera. And now we maybe go full circle and we come back to actually mark making, if you like. That you just said it doesn't matter, there's no pressure. As a non-artist, I went to a watercolor class. I think I told you about it in the summertime, and I thought, I don't know what to do. And of course, you don't have to do anything, you just do something, and that's the creative process. But as a non-artist, that in itself is a bit strange. Where are the rules? What do I do? How do I do it? What am I meant to be doing? Does that make sense to you as I say that to you as an artist?
Yeah, I think, well, we're sort of talking about more intuitive art if we're going down that road, because there's so many different ways that you could interpret, what am I supposed to be doing? What are the rules and so on? Because, you can go to an art class to do something technical and traditional, or you can go, I think more we're talking about here, to really kind of tune in and engage in your creative self. And intuitively, it doesn't really matter what comes out at the end of it. It's the process of just being delighted by the colors, or just putting down some brush strokes, and that is going to translate from the movement that you've expressed, or the way that you're feeling. The way that you're feeling dictates what colors and what gestures you're going to make on the paper or the canvas. What you're feeling one day won't be the same as what you're feeling in it.
No, I love that. And actually, when you may know this particular doctor I'm talking about, Philippa, but there's a doctor who always says, what colour are you feeling today? And she hands you a pot of pens. And I think it's such a clever trick. It's obviously one of her things she does, because, it helps you articulate how you're feeling, and it helps sort of dial into an emotion using a link that you wouldn't naturally use. What colour are you feeling? Oh, here's a red pen. I feel loving or angry or whatever, but it's helping me add something to the words, or helping me articulate those emotions. Philippa, can I ask you about the exhibition? Because it's a very specific container and it's been curated in such a way that it is around water and the area in the region. Could you just tell us a little bit about the exhibition? All the links will be down below. What inspired it and how it came about?
Okay, well, I'm just going to backtrack a little. So you were talking about programming the artistic season at Espace Enchanté, which is this amazing art centre on the shores of Lake Geneva, Lac Le Mans, as it's known in French. And the exhibition is the first exhibition of the 2026 season. So it's called Mirroir Sauvage, which translates as wild mirror. So it's touching on the importance of the water bodies in our lives. So lakes, rivers, oceans, and what they mean, not from a geographical perspective, but from a perspective of why we need them, why we're drawn to them. Why do people flock to the edge of the ocean to see the sun going down? Why is there so much artwork that is reflecting, boats on the ocean, water droplets? Why do we want to be immersed in water, and why is it important? And I think the exhibition is really trying to dive into, excuse the pun, but dive into the sense that water is there as a healer, It's a place where you can go and lose yourself. You can forget about the day-to-day. When you're submerged in water, it's like you're completely alone. It's just you and you're complete. When you're soaking wet and covered in rain, at that moment, not at the moment when you just feel really uncomfortable, but at that moment you feel so alive. There's no other feeling, I don't think, for it. And I don't know what it is about water, and I guess that's why we've created this exhibition about it, because we're just trying to catch that essence which is uncatchable, to say, this wild space, the lake in this case, is not just a geographical landmark. It is really important for our mental health, for our well-being, and for the well-being of our family life, and our own sanity in a way. Water, I can't really, it's really hard to describe. I suppose that's why we've created an exhibition about it, because images are able to speak louder than words.
That's beautifully put, Philippa. And in fact, you're so right, of course you are, but we don't see as many pictures and paintings and artworks around the sunshine, for example. We see far more around water and, like you say, boats, the shore, the lakes. And I spend a lot of time talking to people about things like cold water swimming and biohacking and why immersion in water does make us feel so much better. And of course, lots of people will say, oh, it's because we were, born, we were in the womb and we were surrounded by water, and that's where we were sort of reborn, etc. But you're right, what a lovely thought, how the power of water and the chance to reflect on that during the exhibition, during a visit, taking some time out to really think, okay, how does this make me feel? What does it remind me of? What does it make me excited about? What's the emotional impact of this exhibition? Can I ask you, Philippa, about your own life and the way that creativity speaks to you, and the way that you are also creative? And I wonder if you might be able to recall a time where something important to you came up from a creative process, or perhaps you had a sort of healing experience through the creative process, or even water itself.
Oh, wow. So yes. So I think, the creativity speaks to you at different times in your life in different ways. And I don't think I could really live a life without creativity. I think it makes me certainly feel life more intensely and appreciate everything that's going on around. And I think looking at my artwork, it's helped me navigate my different roles, I guess, in life, and kind of understand a little bit about identity and how that changes. So, for example, after I had my children, a lot of my work would be depicting that kind of intimacy between parent and child. And I think that was a way of kind of understanding how things have shifted away from just the identity of one and into the identity of, a family life. I suppose also during the pandemic, my artwork shifted slightly more towards landscapes and how that holds a really strong importance, as places to heal and as places to reflect, and as places to save people really from any struggles that they might be having.
That's beautiful. I love the thought that you can express times of your life through painting and creativity, because that's obviously not my experience, but wouldn't it be wondrous if we did all have that? Well, of course we all have the ability, but it's like we've all got the ability to, most of us, run a marathon, but we choose not to. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we all started choosing to understand ourselves a little better through a creative outlet? I think we would alleviate a lot of our own inner angst. It would help a lot of that internal struggle that I see my own clients deal with if they were able to let it out. And they don't always want to let it out through words. So yeah, I'd urge anybody listening to think, even if you're just doodling on your page, please get an actual pen out, come away from your computer and see what comes up and see what you feel might be coming out of you. Can I ask, Philippa, this isn't on the list of questions, but can I just ask you your thoughts on freedom and creativity versus control? Because many of my clients are incredibly organized, successful and motivated, and that they have a deep desire for control very often. And I wonder if that limits our creativity because we don't feel free. What would you say to that hypothesis?
Yeah, I think it does incredibly limit, because we put all of these restraints on ourselves. And we have these, I do a lot of teaching as well. I teach art. I teach watercolor and acrylic painting and printmaking. So I see loads of people and I see all different people's approaches to art. And I think a lot of people have these kind of negative voices in their head, probably from their childhood. I'm no psychiatrist. Oh, I'm not good enough, or, that's that, I'm doing it wrong, or, just, and it creates basically a sense of rigidity. And you see that in the work. You see the tightness and the rigidity in the work. And then I have other people who approach it in just this delight, this delight of being able to play with colours and just have a joy in connecting and just having this opportunity to do something really fun and really wonderful. And actually, it's always the older people who have that, because they kind of pass through this sense of having to be a certain way. You know, they're the wild ones. They're the elders, you know, they're the ones who are truly liberated of my students who come to see me, and the little kids, you know, the both ends of the spectrum. When we're in the middle of our lives in that tranche, we still have these voices, these outside forces telling us that how we should be, what we should be doing, or whether something is not quite as it should be.
Do you know, it's so interesting you've just said that, because I was reflecting on a conversation. In fact, I've reflected on this conversation many times that you and I had about the ladies that you sometimes take on your watercolour classes. And when you first told me, I remember my response was a bit like, why would anybody do that? I'd rather go to the south of France and ride my bike. I don't really understand. And of course, because the conversation came up, then, and I do reflect on an awful lot, I have found myself, which is why I secretly went on that watercolour class in the summer. I was like, I wonder if I would enjoy this. For those of you that don't know, I am an avid data tracker, so all my clients wear Whoop bands, and I'm constantly tracking what's going on in their nervous system. For the 3 hours I was doing the watercolour class, Philippa, my stress score on my Whoop was actually lower, flatter than if I'd been meditating. I was like, wow, there's actual data to support this is really good for me. I must do it more. Now, I know that's not really how creativity should work. But if that's what encourages people, and they begin to see, A, how relaxing it is, and B, how it up levels their creative ability, their decision making, their discernment, their intuition, they're skills we can't teach. They're skills that we have to sort of cultivate from the inside. And I'm yapping on now because I just think how exciting to discover that in midlife, having lost it as a, you know, I'm off on a course now. I'm excited about this. I thought I might try some pottery as well, because I fancy getting really dirty.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more mess I like making. So I think that's a rebellious side of me coming out.
Yeah. There's a technique that some intuitive painters use, and it's interesting. You working on a canvas and then you hand it over to somebody else to do something. Yeah, right. Um, and it's just that, like, letting go, and that's something that's really interesting in life as well. You know, you hold on to your emotions, don't you? And you hold on to negativity, and you hold on to, I don't know, a certain idea, or you can't, you know, you can't let go of a feeling of frustration or anger or whatever, like negative emotions. And sometimes when you're doing art, you know, you get really attached to your painting for some reason, whatever reason it is, and but just giving it to somebody else to just kind of change completely, and just not caring about it. You know, if we're talking about that kind of painting, intuitive painting, it's a really nice exercise to see, like, okay, I'm gonna practice just letting go, letting somebody just do their thing.
Gosh, I think, can you imagine that with a bunch of middle-aged chief executives? I mean, that would be, I mean, I'm feeling triggered just thinking about it. So you're going to create something, you're going to birth something on paper or on a canvas, and then you're going to give it to somebody else. And in my head, the words I wanted to use was, I'm going to give it to somebody else to ruin it. I mean, what does that tell you about my control needs and my levels of trust? Oh my gosh. I did a podcast recently about Lego Serious Play, and in all seriousness, I mean, this is a similar sort of process where you have people come and use Lego modelling to describe what's going on in their organisations. Dave Jones, who I've known for a long, long time, was explaining how he uses it, and he was saying it's so it's working in the subconscious so strongly because people pick up a piece of Lego and then they start describing this with words they didn't even know they had, which then relate to their organisation. And I think art is exactly the same process, isn't it? Something's coming out of us and we're not controlling it. It's exciting. I have got loads of other questions to ask you, and I'm now off in my head imagining this amazing retreat for intuitive painting where people lose their control needs that they've hardwired in themselves for the last 50 years. I don't quite know how it's going to manifest itself, Philippa, but if anyone's listening, they fancy coming on a 3-day retreat to do that, we're here and waiting for you, because I think that would be absolutely awesome. Can I ask you a bit more about your work as an artist and as the programmer of the I keep saying expedition, I'm so sorry, exhibition, both in my head. Can I ask how you move between, you've got many roles as a mum, as a wife, as a friend, as a member of the community, as a teacher, as an artist, but how do you move between that role of being the artist and then being the programmer, the sort of, and I'm talking about sort of leadership and alluding to that organizational versus creative. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite a natural thing. I've always worked between those roles, and I think it's been more out of necessity. So, as soon as I finished my education, I worked as an artist, actually creating huge canvases for homes in London. But then alongside that, I was working in art centres, in arts administration, theatres and dance festival and multi-art centres, which had all the different arts disciplines. And at the same time, I was always wanting to create my own work. I didn't want to lose that part of myself. So I think it's been quite natural. I quite like the role of directing the narrative in that way. And I think it leads to really interesting collaborations. So it allows me to work with different kinds of people. And I really love making those connections. I really love collaborating with people. I think it makes everything a lot more interesting because you can bring so many more voices to the table. I mean, it isn't without its challenges because, you have to manage lots of people's opinions in a very kind of matrix organization where everybody's voices need to be heard. So it has definitely got its challenges, but it's really, really nice to be able to combine the two and work with really interesting people who are inspiring. I wouldn't want to work in a vacuum.
No, I love that word collaboration, and helping people know that their voices have been heard. Because I think the biggest challenge I see in leadership roles is that ability to dance between leading and then collaborating. And often if somebody's really coded into that leadership role, they are a bit of a lone wolf. They're out the front, they're leading, and they're not necessarily collaborating as much as you're describing, and they're certainly not always listening as much as they could do, because the pressure to lead is on, especially if there's huge financial pressures involved. So yeah, well done for describing that, Philippa, because that's something that, like you say, you've been doing that all your life. You're obviously called to do both. Do you notice the difference when you switch between your own creative process and then the work that involves sort of organizing and arranging other things?
Yeah, but in a way they overlap a lot because when you're an artist, most of the time you are doing everything for yourself anyway because you're a sole trader basically. So you are marketing your work, you're in charge of your finances, you are doing your social medias, you're not working, you're working as like every single um area of like a company but just in micro format because you're one person. So you have to have that understanding, if you're wanting to sell your work in a sense, you have to be able to market it. You have to be able to deal with, look at every aspect of that business side of things. And really importantly, you have to have an understanding of your public because, like where we are by Lake Geneva, the villages around, who's going to come to these exhibitions? Who are we going to interest? What people are going to turn up and what can we offer them? Like, how can we make this valuable to them? I think that's really important. For me, creating art is not just for the artist. I think they also have to think about who their viewer is. I mean, that is a really heavy subject because I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me in like a postmodernist way. But for me, I want to create things that are beautiful, that engage and are emotive. And I'm thinking about who's going to see it.
I love the way you've described that. You're not playing to the audience, but you want to produce something that engages other people. I think that's a lovely way of putting it. Philippa, can you tell us a bit more about the exhibition itself and who is the audience? What will happen? Is there work available to purchase? What's that experience going to be like?
Yeah, of course. So as I said, it's called Mirroir Sauvage, which is a wild mirror. And it's all based around the water bodies and their importance. So myself, I'm collaborating with photographer Jackie Cutler on creating a series of photographs which fuse photography and digital painting. And they are images of women, female figures in the water. And I think the reason, Lindsey, why we were speaking about this, because a lot of the titles are to do with breathing and coming up for air and or holding your breath. And so that's how we got into that conversation, because of the sophrology aspect of the importance of breath, and then linking that to being submerged, in the water, coming up for breath and having that kind of regular breathing that you also have when you're swimming, and you're creating that rhythm. Then we have Alexandra van Lierde from Belgium, who is an amazing artist, amazing oil painter, who I first met in Manila. I used to live there, and she used to live there. She lived there for many, many years. And her work really touches on the important themes of the exhibition, as nature as a place to reflect. And a lot of her work evokes the ocean and water and lakes, and it's very abstract, but at the same time, it's got these kind of invitations of escape. There might be like the suggestion of a little boat on the horizon. The colors kind of draw you in, and then there's always this sense of light. And I think with her work, if I may, that the sense of light is also this suggestion of the light on the other side, maybe like a conversation between two worlds. And maybe in nature, we also are able to touch on things that we've lost in our lives. And that might not just be the water. It could be like a walk in the forest. You suddenly have those moments when you feel very close to things that you've lost. So that's her work is very special to me in that way. And then Larissa Mayarova, she's a watercolor artist, and she's one of our collective. Her work is drenched in water droplets, mist, and it's very much located in like an alpine forest environment. So I see her work as like the root of the exhibition, because it's the water that's coming down into the lake. And she's actually doing a masterclass at the opening on creating water droplets. So if anybody has dreamed of being able to paint those like a delicate water droplet, something really simple on a leaf, then she's going to be giving that masterclass, which is going to be a really special moment. And then we have a group from Switzerland. So we thought it would be really nice to engage with the other side of our lake border, who are run by the Zoen Foundation. And their project is called Hydromont, which is Worlds of Water. And they're exhibiting a series of drawings which show the different faces of Lac Le Mans, but from a very poetic point of view.
Just as you're talking, Philippa, and you're describing it, it's making me feel excited, because I was thinking, oh, how wonderful to go and gaze on artwork that evokes that, like you say, the other side, whether it's, past lives, the future, whatever, it's this gap between worlds, but also to immerse ourselves in nature and remind ourselves of our own mortality, of course, and how fragile we are and how wondrous the world is. And I think you're right. I was up in the forest this morning, and when you look at those trees, they've been here an awful lot longer than me, and they've been here in the times of my ancestors as well. And I think when we have that perspective, when our perspective changes, everything changes. Go and lie on the floor, you can see very different things than if you're standing up straight or sitting in a chair. And I just feel so excited to think, oh gosh, you get to go to that exhibition and have that experience. You're not just going to look at paintings. You're going to have a whole immersive, emotional journey. Will there be work available to buy, Philippa? I know the space also has a lovely, the location is phenomenal, and there's also often the cafe that's open there as well. But is there opportunities to purchase and engage?
Yeah, all the work's available for sale. So it's an interesting place, because if it was, I always describe this to people, because I'm British, right? So I'm describing this to people. If this was in the UK, it would be known as a national trust property. In France, it's a domain. So it's a beautiful old building, which was the ancestral home of a silk manufacturer in Lyon. It was his holiday home on the shores of Lac Le Mans. And it's surrounded by these little villages. So we get people visiting from the villages to view the art. We have our loyal core of visitors, people who come and view the exhibitions and take part in the workshops. But then we're also connected to Nyon, which is the other side of the lake. It's a town right next to Geneva. It's only 10 minutes from Geneva by boat. So you can get the boat across, which is really cool. You can get the boat across to the port of Ivoire, and then you just walk up to the gallery. So it's very close to Geneva, but at the same time, it's in the middle of this nature reserve.
It certainly does feel like quite a special place. And I'll put that in the show notes as well so people can find you. But I also hope that people might pay a special visit, especially on a rainy day if they're coming from the surrounding areas. I hope that we might engage a few from further afield as well. Can I ask about your own work now, Philippa? And can I ask you about the philosophy or intention or story behind your own work currently? Because I'd love people to hear more about the way that you work as an artist and the kind of work that you produce.
Okay, great. Well, I can tell you about the techniques that I use firstly. So I am just I love three techniques at the moment, which is watercolor, printmaking, and then I work in a lot of digital illustration as well. And I think I love the first two because they offer this element of surprise. Watercolor is I work in contemporary watercolor. So we're not talking about creating like little, very technical images of what you see. I'm not interested in hyperrealism or anything like that. I'd rather see the brushstrokes. And I love it because they give these reactions depending on the water quantity you use or the different elements that you use. It reacts differently. And so you're always going to create something new. And it's the same with printmaking. You don't know what you're going to get really until you lift the paper off the carving that you've created. I work in carving with wood and work carving on rubber, and then you're always surprised. So that's really like the techniques of where I am. And I love playing with digital illustration at the same time because it's new and it's exciting, and it also I love things that are contemporary and playful, and it offers that for my work. In terms of theme, everything is related to nature. It's all grounded in nature, in the importance of nature as this place where we can heal. The moments, the feeling of being where you are at a particular day on a particular point. So I try and create these atmospheric landscapes, which, they're not going to reflect exactly what I see. They're not the photograph of where I was because I want to infuse it with colors that reflect my mood at that time. And I'm always working from my own kind of references because it has to reflect what's inside you. So there's no point in taking a reference from somebody else's photograph or from what somebody else described to me. It has to be something that I've experienced myself, walking in nature where I am, or something that I see, or the person that I'm with at that particular time. So that's my work. And most of my work is landscapes, but I do lots of portraits and figures as well. But currently, a lot of it is landscapes. And the collaboration with Jackie, the photography collaboration, digital art collaboration, is more figurative, but it's the figures immersed in the landscape, which is really this fusion of how it feels to be within and connected and really part of the natural world, not separate from it. When you're part of the natural world, you have to respect it if you want to respect yourself. So, it's like we're part of it, so let's take care of it because it took care of us. So now we have to take care of our environment.
That's beautifully put, Philippa. And I love that, those links there between when we are in our natural environment, not only do we get that sense of awe and wonder, but we also sometimes feel much more secure and grounded. Certainly I notice the difference between being in cities versus being in the countryside. I feel a lot safer. I feel a lot sort of more held by the space. And you were talking about the watercolours and the pictures I know that Jackie's done of the women in the water. What a wonderful place to be held yet surrendered. I'm excited to see these. I think that's wonderful. Philippa, because you've lived in so many places, I know that you've been in Miami, you've been in Manila. I'm sure your journey has taken you to other places as well. How has that impacted or changed the way that you create your art?
It's changed it hugely because in each place I've learned something different. So in Asia, Asia is the home of block printing, and it was created in, if I'm not mistaken, in China by Buddhist monks transposing their texts through carving the text there. And then it made its way Japan and the Philippines. So that's where I learned how to do a lot of the printmaking techniques. And the style of teaching there is very different from a European style. It's much more from an observation point of view. You observe, you learn from the master. Don't ask questions. You just watch and learn. Whereas when I was growing up in London, it was very much, a different approach. Like, you need to ask, you need to be inquisitive, and challenge things. I moved to the America and Florida, and the opening up of the creative world there was very much inspired by the woman whose studio I worked at. She was a yoga practitioner, and she had dived into that world of yoga out of necessity because she needed a place of calm to balance her life. And so we did a lot of this fusing of yoga, meditation, and art. And when I moved here, I tried to bring that with me. Some of the little mini retreats I do down at Espace Enchanté, they'll have part yoga morning where I'll ask a yoga instructor to join us for the morning, and part art. And it's really this sense of opening up creatively, relaxing, letting things go, letting the ego go, before then you get into the process of creating. So the philosophy is that it will help you be more creative, be more in tune, and less judgmental of yourself. And that's what I learned when I was there. So I think the more you travel, the more you learn. It's like an opportunity for you to learn things differently that you would never, ever have the opportunity to learn from a book, because it's engaging with people from different cultures who have come at life from completely different angles.
I love it when you do understand the story behind a piece of artwork. I'm referring to some sort of revelations I've had recently about the stories behind the people that created the artwork, and it suddenly brought it all to life, and I understood so much more. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you think people are looking for when they stand in front of a piece of art? And I know we debated this question before we started the interview. And I said, can you imagine for somebody, I'm going to say somebody like me. So I think I struggled my way through an art GCSE, and it was an absolute car crash. And I ended up creating these wild sculptures because my ability to create anything realistic with a pen or paint was just not something I'd learned to do. And then I haven't gone back. I stand in front of a piece of artwork and formally think, what am I meant to do? What am I meant to think? But I've been learning in my own experience as a meditation practitioner, as a sophrologist, as a visualization coach, I've understood that there's a whole load of more stuff going on. I don't have to stand in front of a painting or a picture and think, what am I meant to do? I can allow myself to open up, like you just said, and wonder. Oh, now it's making a bit more sense. But what do you think happens to people, creative or otherwise, when they come into contact with a piece of artwork? Can you describe what you think goes on in our minds and our bodies?
Yeah, I think, like we said before, it depends who you are and the age you are at that time, and what time in life you are at. Like, my 10-year-old self was much more appreciative of classic art than me now. When I was little, I loved going to the Tate Britain, and I mean, I still do, but I loved going to see Ophelia by Mallet. She was like my favorite painting in the world because it was so pretty and beautiful. But now I used to look at it and I think, yeah, it is, but it's also really dark, which I didn't notice when I was that young because I didn't have any of those life experiences that I do now. So I think it depends where you are, what's happened to you in life as what you see. And interestingly, I think you may have seen like those things that they have where two people will look at a painting and one will see something completely different to the other person. I think it's something to do with the brain. They have those visual tests, and people look at things in completely different ways, and what one person sees is going to be totally different to somebody else. I've just done a sort of series of like mini reveals of artwork, and I think, some people will walk past and other people will just stand there staring at a piece of work. That I love that because it means that they're being really drawn in. Well, hopefully they're being really drawn into the piece, and it's really connecting with them in some kind of way. For me, I can't really explain it. I think it's just you have to you feel some kind of a connection with some pieces that you don't feel with others. In other ways, you look at a piece of artwork and it's telling you a story. It's there as a factual reference. If you go to some of the classic galleries, they're there to tell very specific stories. The portraits and the religious artworks there are a part of a narrative. I also have these big groups of school children who come to Espace Enchanté, and we teach them about the painters who painted like Le Mans, the 20th century painters. And as well as those painters, I show them an array of contemporary painters because I just want them to make a connection. So if they cannot connect with some of the 20th century painters who maybe are a little bit too classic, maybe there's something in the contemporary work that speaks to them. And I think that that's it. It depends. People are completely diverse, and what connects with one person will not connect with another person, and vice versa.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I think also, in order to even contemplate a piece of artwork, we also have to stop. And in a world that's become so information orientated, often we don't even stop. We just whiz past, or we might even stand still, but our brain is still going at 100 miles an hour. And you simply can't contemplate or wonder if your brain is whizzing off and doing other things. It doesn't work. So I would love to encourage people to just, especially over this Christmas period that we've got coming up, that if you do come across any artwork or even landscape in nature, just try and engage in wonder and curiosity, because I think in terms of the ability to be curious and wonder, we're doing it less and less and less. Philippa, can I move on to AI and the sort of creative need? I've just been to a conference where they were very much talking about the mechanization of humanity. And it was a very big conference with a lot of younger creatives in London. And they were talking a lot about the sort of the human quality we have left that can't be AI'd is creativity. This can't be reproduced because, like you say, it's so individual and so from the inside. What are your thoughts? Because also you've got children on the digital age, the acceleration of the information age, and AI in the world of art. What have you seen? What have you noticed? What are your thoughts?
Well, as far as children are concerned, I think that they're more interested in the creative process than the outcome. And that's practical. That's getting your hands dirty and putting those brushstrokes on paper. And, when they were talking about the jobs that AI can't take away, they are all the practical jobs. Hairdressing or bricklaying, the ones that you do with your hands, making a painting, if you're the process of it, that is something that you have to do. You cannot think it. You can't think it onto the page. In terms of so if you ask AI to generate an image for you, you don't get that sense of satisfaction. You don't get the pleasure because you're not learning by doing, which is really a way that you will learn to become a better artist, is by learning by actually doing the technique. You're not going to learn it by reading about it. You have to make your mistakes. You have to mess up like 100 times, or create things that aren't, if you want to improve your technique, that is. And then eventually you'll create something beautiful that you can hold and has been created by your own hands, and you can see the texture of it. I don't have anything against AI, but we're discussing like the pros and the cons. AI is flat. You can't, at the moment you can't create texture from it, if I'm not mistaken. You cannot see the bumps of the paint coming out and the scratch marks and this kind of texture that you get in a lot of artwork. So you can't see the human input into it. But I think it probably generates a lot of ideas. If you are feeling flat yourself and you're like, oh, I cannot think of any ideas, it creates a lot of surreal images, I think. When I was younger, when I was a teenager, I loved the work of Salvador Dali. I thought it was amazing. Who could think of that? Like a body with loads of drawers, like a chest of drawers coming out of this female figure. And I think AI can come up with those like weird and wonderful things because it's putting together elements and it's not using the human brain. So in a way that is pretty creative, I suppose, because it's leaving behind any sense of organization, like the way our brains are organized, is bringing in all of these random elements to create an image. And I think that a lot of mural artists use AI to come up with those ideas. But yeah, it can't replace the process.
No, I'm hoping that we've got a return to creativity. And there are some schools that are now beginning to ban computers, and they're back to textbooks, pens and paper. And yourself, Philippa, if you order an actual book that's been printed and written properly and edited, it's very different than if you just pull something off the internet, an article or a piece of quick writing, if you like, that slow writing. a bit like the sourdough I've been baking, the slow bread. I've learned so much more. I could taste so much more because I put the nuts and the raisins into the bread. By the way, it was raisin bread. It was delicious. I knew there was no sugar in it. I was like, oh, this is a creative process. How incredibly interesting that we're having this conversation today as well, especially off the back of some of the other conversations I've had about water recently and holding your breath as a way to suspend yourself and press pause on life. It feels like it's all wrapping in together in a really lovely way. Philippa, there's a million other things we could talk about, but I'm aware of the time, and I also wanted to give you the opportunity just to speak any more about the exhibition itself, give us any more information, or is there anything that we haven't covered today that you would like to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I just say that if you are the kind of person who's curious and you want a bit of an adventure, you want to come and have a moment of reflection, then it's a great place to come. And, I moved to this part of France for the mountains. I didn't even think about the lake. And the lake was like this amazing surprise to me, which is weird because I lived here before as well. Like I lived here for 3 years before my travels around Asia and America. And it wasn't on my radar. And suddenly it's like, this is a huge part of my life, this amazing body of water. And when you come and see the work, you'd be surprised at the colors because that this part of the lake, it can look tropical, really. I mean, I joke, look, it's Thailand, because it's like verdant green and emerald green and so unbelievably beautiful and unspoiled, and a little unknown as well. So that's why I say, if you're interested in a little bit of adventure, it's not really on your usual stomping ground. It's not on the beaten path.
Oh, it's a beautiful part of the world. And like you say, it's a surprise every time you visit the lake. And certainly as I get older, water is becoming more important to me. And in fact, every day I remind myself how fortunate we are to have the amount of hot water that we have. We live in very abundant times. This hot, clean water that comes out the tap whenever we want it, the cold, fresh water that comes out the tap to drink. It's a great privilege, and I hope people can begin to really find joy in life through that. Philippa, the dates of the exhibition are January till...
Yeah, the opening is on the 11th of January, and it closes...
So do not miss this opportunity. I will make sure all the links are down below wherever you're watching or listening to this. And Philippa, I think until next time, I think we just have to urge people to go. If they're not local to here, please go somewhere else and look at some artwork and practice having a sense and experience of wonder and awe and curiosity, because they're human experiences that I think we probably don't have enough of. Philippa, until next time, anything else to add, or shall we close for now and make sure that we get as many people through the doors as possible?
Well, I just wanted to say thanks so much, Lindsey, for having me on and for having this conversation with me. It's been a pleasure.
I've learnt so much, Philippa, so until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.